Good morning, everyone. Here's the AM update for May 11th. The Ukrainian counteroffensive north of Kharkiv city continued to successfully push Russian forces back to the Russia-Ukrainian border on May 10th. Fighting on Snake Island has also tilted in favor of Ukraine, who don't actually have a navy, if you remember. Russian boats are being exposed to drone attacks and now cannot use the island for resupply of those ships, which makes it even harder for them to try and conduct any kind of amphibious landing anywhere, let alone the heavily fortified Odessa. European countries that heavily rely on Russian gas will be paying close attention to the latest move by Ukraine, which says it will suspend flows of natural gas through some of its pipeline network that transport a third of the fuel delivered to Europe. There are 5 major pipelines that run from Russia to Europe. 2 of them run through Ukraine. It was only a matter of time, really, before Ukraine would begin to consider not allowing Russian gas to flow through its country to Europe. It really is just funding the war effort against the Ukrainians. Most nations probably would have shut them off or destroyed them by now, and Ukraine seems to be bolstered by U.S. support and funding that completely dwarfs anything the EU has given the Ukrainians by potentially hitting the Russians in its energy sector where it would hurt, but it also hurt the Europeans. The United States doesn't rely on Russian natural gas, so they can continue to help fund and support Ukraine while Europe kind of falters in that arena, which I'll talk about a little bit later. Russia says it does have energy buyers without Western countries, with Sergei Lavrov saying they'll let the West pay more than it's used to paying in the Russian Federation, and then explain to its populations why they should become poor. This is a double-edged sword because it's not like these logistics networks are already in place. That has to be a build-up that's going to cost Russia a lot of money. Trying to find buyers to replace Europe will be significant because they're competing with the Middle East still too, and it's not like they can ship these things to Africa. There's already deals in place with the Middle East for countries like China, India, etc. They may want to buy some cheaper Russian fuel, but the balance will take place, and eventually Russia's going to get hurt by this. Russia's infrastructure was maintained largely by a lot of Western technology. And with that technology, with them losing access to the technology outside of the black markets, they won't be able to maintain or even improve on their energy processing, and they may actually slide backwards to a more, a more rudimentary style of energy processing and refining. So this is going to hurt Russia. I get that Sergei Lavrov just wants to point out that it's going to hurt the West. That's his job, but there's a double-edged sword here. Yes, the prices will go up, but also those prices are going to affect Russia heavily as well when it comes to them trying to maintain their energy infrastructure to push exports out to. Those 5 pipelines that ran into Europe being shut off will definitively hurt Russia in the short term, but which could cause problems for the Kremlin trying to continue to justify this war in Ukraine. 5 Russian governors have resigned recently in Russia with no word on why this is taking place. This is dozens of Russian officials from the low-level local areas all the way up to the Kremlin have begun resigning. Some have tried to resign and Putin has told them no, such as the banking official, I can't remember her name, but she tried to resign and Putin said no. So more cracks are forming in the Kremlin's kind of barrier of people that support Putin because of this war in Ukraine. The UN General Assembly voted Tuesday to elect the Czech Republic to the UN Human Rights Council. This was the seat that Russia previously filled, but they were kicked off and then subsequently withdrew from it so that they wouldn't be, it doesn't look like they were getting fired, they quit, but everyone knew what really happened. Russia has now lost 40 colonels in this war and up to 12 generals. The number varies between 10 to 12. With General Gerasimov being a very high-profile general that was wounded in the front line during his visit. He's one of the highest-ranking officials in the Kremlin. More than 8 million Ukrainians have been internally displaced by the war, according to the UN's International Organization for Migration. The Office of Ukraine's Prosecutor General said Wednesday it would try a 21-year-old Russian soldier who is in Ukrainian custody. This would be the first Russian service member to stand trial in the country on war crimes since the war began. European union diplomats failed to agree Wednesday morning on how to phase out Russian oil imports. Now, I was talking about natural gas. This is oil. The biggest hang-up comes from Budapest, Hungary, where talks between Budapest and the European Commission continue on overcoming this deadlock. They're expected to continue talking, but it's unclear when the EU body will actually meet to in Brussels to discuss the matter formally. So ongoing issues where Hungary is saying they're not agreeing with the Russian oil embargoes. Ukraine's foreign minister, Dmitry Kuleba, said in an interview that he believes the United States and other Western allies if the United States and other Western allies had only trusted Kyiv more and provided more weapons that Kyiv requested in the months prior to Russia's late February invasion, thousands of lives may have been saved. Now hold up a sec. On January 28th, Ukraine's President Zelensky himself downplayed the threat of an imminent Russian invasion after a phone call where President Biden said one was coming. This is something that continues to bother me about the Ukrainian government. The Russians invaded less than a month after the U.S. said Russia's going to invade, and the Ukrainians said, no, they're not. The U.S. was right about going with the war that was going to happen in Ukraine, in their country. And then they lecture us about the trust that we didn't have. I mean, we are about to spend $40 billion on Ukraine. In total, the U.S. has spent over $50 billion in that country. That is almost 1/3 of the annual GDP of the entirety of Ukraine. So I keep harping on this. If these Ukrainian officials want to drive Americans to indifference of your plight because we have no strategic interest in Ukraine other than stopping Russia's adventurism, keep saying things like if only America had trusted Kyiv and provided weapons earlier. We told you that this war was coming and you didn't believe us. You Ukrainians in your own country didn't believe the Americans. Your president downplayed it on January 28th. So when your foreign minister comes out and says, if only the U.S. trusted us, that kind of pisses Americans off because that's not how it happened. So you have to wonder that when situations like this arise, what would Europe and Ukraine look like if America didn't care? What would this war look like if America didn't stand up and say, sure, we'll help you out more than any other country, and most countries combined have helped out Ukraine in both intelligence, military equipment, training, and money. A Europe where America doesn't care because people say things like this becomes very dark in my opinion. So again, I wish these officials would kind of cage what they're saying, because already in the US we're seeing this indifference start to take place. It's not hitting the news as much. It's not being talked about, even whether it's from the local to the national level. And if you're going to somewhat insult Americans in this situation, that's just going to continue on. So just a little bit of a heads up and some constructive criticism, if you will. Have a good day, everyone.